Good afternoon. This is Chandra Scott with the Louisiana Department of Education. This training today is going to be somewhat of a repeat from the previous Supply Assistance Funds training we conducted in March of 2022. However, we have had additional allocations since that time and wanted to conduct an additional training to provide information about the second and third allocation, as well as provide reminders about the parameters of this funding. Today, we will begin going over the following: general information, allowable and unallowable products, allocation and attestation information, oversight, reporting, and record keeping, financial management, and some other helpful information. To start, here is some general information about the Supply Chains Fund. USDA has allocated $1 billion in relief funding to state agencies made available through the Commodity Credit Corporation and authorized under the CCC Charter Act. These resources are referred to as a supply chain assistance fund. The supply chain assistance funds are targeted to provide a rapid and direct response via supply commodities to affected school districts. On December the 17th, USDA announced that $1 billion will be provided to states for cash payments and that school districts can use purchased foods for their school meals. These funds were intended to be a direct form of relief from the ongoing supply chain issues and to improve the quality and consistency of school meals. Louisiana received the first allocation in the amount of $16,965,978 in supply chain funds to distribute to NSLP participating schools, including public, tribal, charter schools, and nonprofit private schools, as well as residential child care institutions. You can see Memo SFS 22-57 linked here. Louisiana has received a second allocation in the amount of $15,954,177. The funds went out on October the 3rd, 2022. The third allocation in the amount of $7,584,631 will be distributed soon. Right now, Appropriation Control has the allocated amounts and working on distributing them. The SCA funds are a critical funding stream, and it is meant to provide additional financial resources to help schools purchase domestic food products as part of school districts' effort to respond to the supply chain disruptions. We know that as a result of COVID-19, there were a large number of supply chain disruptions and increasing costs on products and school systems having to go outside of their bids to purchase products. All of this just to get nutritious meals on the table for students. So the goal of these funds is to help lighten the blow of the financial difficulties that come with purchasing these products. Upon receipt of the funds, state agencies were instructed to distribute the money using a formula that was described by USDA. USDA did make it clear that all SFAs operating the National School Lunch Program and or the School Breakfast Program may be eligible to receive the Supply Chain Assistance Funds. Systems that are not operating the Child Nutrition Funds are not eligible to receive assistance. The eligibility for Supply Chain Assistance Fund is not distinguished by school type. So residential child care institutions, as well as charter schools, parochial schools, private schools, and public schools are all eligible as long as they are operating the National School Lunch Program and or the School Breakfast Program. These funds are meant to solely support the National School Lunch Program and or School Breakfast Program. They can only be used by the SFA to purchase unprocessed or minimally processed domestic food products for those particular programs. Within the National School Lunch Program, we also have the Seamless Summer Waiver and the National School Lunch Program After Snack Program. Since those two are components of this program, these funds can be used to support those programs. If an SFA is operating other child nutrition programs, such as the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, the Summer Food Service Program, or the Child and Adult Care Program, The funds cannot be used in conjunction with those programs. The funds are limited to the purchase of domestic food products to support the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. We will now discuss what these funds can be spent on and some items they cannot be used to purchase. So let's review some examples of allowable products. The products must be a domestic food product, so they have to be unprocessed or minimally processed, and they have to be domestic. Some allowable food products include fluid milk and other dairy foods such as a cheese and yogurt, fruits and vegetables, which include 100% juices as long as they are fully domestic. Grain products like pasta, rice, meats, which include whole meat, pieces, or ground meat. All of those are considered to be minimally processed, as well as meat alternates like beans and legumes. A variety of processing states are allowable for fruits and vegetables. Your products can be whole, cut, pureed, fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. So all of those are allowable and considered minimally processed. We often gotten the question about whether or not flavored milks and flavored yogurts are considered to be minimally processed. Yes, these products are eligible for purchase with these funds and are considered minimally processed items. So flavored milks, whether it be strawberry or chocolate or flavored yogurt, are all considered minimally processed and can be used with these funds in addition to the traditional white unflavored milk. The Buy American requirements traditionally in our programs are to purchase products that are domestic to the maximum extent practical. You are still allowed to purchase non-domestic products following the Buy American provision and exemption form. However, for this source of funding, you will not be allowed to utilize supply chain funds for non-domestic products. In addition, and as with all federal funds, SFAs are required to follow the state and federal procurement regulations. Now, let's discuss some of the foods that are not permitted. On the previous slide, we discussed how even if the product is minimally processed or unprocessed, it is not actually domestic. It can be purchased with these funds. Additionally, items that are significantly processed cannot be purchased with SCA funds. One of the examples that has been used is a frozen pizza. If you were to buy a fully prepared pre-made pizza that is comprised of ingredients that will be allowable individually, that pre-made pizza is not allowable because it's significantly processed or prepared. So you can use the funds to purchase the crushed tomatoes, shredded cheese, whole wheat flour, and sliced pieces, and you can use these items to make the pizza yourself. But you could not purchase a pre-made pizza with these funds. Other examples of allowable products include baked goods such as breads, muffins, crackers, prepackaged sandwiches, or meals, or other prepared and or pre-cooked items such as chicken nuggets that come ready to eat or that require no further preparation beyond heating. The funds are to be used solely for purchases of food. They can be unprocessed or minimally processed domestic products, but you cannot use the funds to allocate for labor or other administrative expenses. These funds are to be used solely for food. If there are non-food costs that are essential to the procurement of these products, then those costs can be allowable with these funds. So if there are incidental costs such as those related to like shipping and handling or packaging that are part of the normal price purchasing, then those fees would be allowable in this case with the funding source as well. There is no requirement for purchasing locally, although we hear from many SFAs that they are using these funds to purchase locally grown, raised, or caught food. The requirement is that they are domestic, so they are grown or produced in the United States. The requirements do not require your products to be local to this particular area, but they can be used for local procurement. So we encourage you to procure local foods when possible. You can make purchases from local producers, which is an excellent option for addressing unexpected supply chain disruptions. All SFAs operating the National School Lunch Program and or the School Breakfast Program have submitted attestation information sheets. A new attestation will be required to receive further SCA funds payments. Are all SFAs required to accept SCA funds? SFAs may select to receive SCA funds from their state agency, but are not required to do so. However, all SFAs currently operating the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program have accepted the SCA funds from their prior two allocations. Can SFAs utilize a food service management company accept SCA funds? An SFA that utilize a food service management company or a vendor are eligible for these funds, but they must follow the same guidance as our self-prep operations. If the purchases are made by the FSMC, they should be credited back on invoices, or if the SFA is purchasing particularly minimally processed items, there needs to be some kind of communication between the SFMC and the SFA about which items are domestic and are therefore eligible for use of these funds. The funds should not be given as a lump sum to the SFMC. Also, SFAs retain the ability to purchase allowable food items that are outside of their food service management contract as long as the contract permits so. Excuse me. These funds are provided to the SFA, so the SFA will receive the benefits of this funding source and it should not be passed on to the FSMC. However, the SFSMC should help to make sure that they are spending those funds appropriately. So if an SFA is utilizing a food service management company, similar documentation would be needed so the funding can be used toward payments or specific invoices that may be associated with those agreements. It is incumbent on the SFA to ensure that payments over the period in which the award is used or charged or used only for minimally processed domestic food products. Excuse me. The SFA will need to work with their SFMC or the vendor to ensure appropriate expenditures are being made and documented for foods that are meeting the requirements as specified in the terms and conditions of the award. Also, documentation should include invoices for minimally processed domestic food purchase in support of the contract and or at least equal to SCA funds paid to the SFMC or vendor. Our state agency has issued funds for the first two allocations. The first allocation was sent out on March the 18th, 2022, and the second allocation was sent out on October the 3rd, 2022. As a state agency, our obligation is to distribute all funds by September 30th, 2023. Allocations to individual school district were based on a predetermined formula. There were two components. The first component was a base payment of $5,000 to all schools that operate the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program that were operated in October as of 2021. The remaining funds was based on a percentage of enrollment that SFAs has compared to the statewide student enrollment. So the base payment of $5,000 was to ensure that even the smallest district received meaningful funding level. The proportional amount is intended to provide resources that scale with the size of the student population served by an SFA. We used the most recent data that was available, reflected as of October the 21st, as described by USDA, to calculate the funding to provide to individual school systems. In order to determine the calculation, we started with our entire awarded amount. The third allocation is $7,584,631. The state agencies then allocated $5,000 to each SFA. We then looked at the enrollment of each SFA from their October 2021 claim, and we compared that to the total enrollment of all National School Lunch Program, school lunch, operating schools to determine the percentage of that statewide attendance for that particular SFA held. From there, we multiplied the figure by the remaining balance after we awarded the $5,000 to each SFA, and that gave the additional amount of funding that we would provide. The $5,000 plus the additional payment was added together to get the payments allocation for each SFA. Now, let's discuss oversight, reporting, and record keeping. There is a requirement that SFAs maintain records to support the purchase made with these funds, and those records need to be very similar to what we would review during a normal administrative review. We will review the use of these funds in the same manner as other funds within a nonprofit school food service account. Oversight of all programs funds is included in existing oversight and monitoring measures conducted by SFNS and state agency. The execution of these oversight measures, as well as the retention of purchase records, will ensure accountability and appropriate use of the SCA funds consistent with FNS and CCC requirements. SFAs are required to maintain documentation to support the food purchase with these funds. The funds are to be used for the unprocessed or minimally processed domestic food products and equal in amount received, consistent with the regular program recording requirements. All records must be maintained by the SFA. This includes invoices, receipts, and other documentation provided when the SFA execute purchases with these funds. We also know that invoices or receipts don't always include the domestic origin. So, just as you would do with similar measures to meet the Buy American provision, you may need to have some other supporting documentation to support the purchase of products to guarantee that they are domestic. You are not required to proactively provide documentation to the state agency regarding your food purchases. However, it needs to be available for administrative review audits and other review you may receive. This spreadsheet may be a little harder to see, but this spreadsheet that was developed to help SFAs who want to utilize it to keep track of invoices as they spend down the allocated SCA funds. It collects the invoice date, the invoice number, and the vendor. This example also specifies the milk. Also, there are other line items that can be included. As the cost is entered in the far right column, it will start decreasing your allocated SCA funds until it gets to zero. This is just a sample to keep track of these invoices to ensure you are spending down the funds for the unprocessed or minimally processed domestic foods. And next, we will discuss financial management. Most SCA funds SCA funds be deposited. Must SCA funds be deposited into an SFA nonprofit school food service account? Yes, the funds are going to be deposited into the school food service account, nonprofit account. Once the funds are deposited into the account, you do not have to track them separately from other monies with that account. However, you will have to track the amount of money specifically spent from SCA funds on allowable products. May SCA funds be used to cover the cost of retroactive expenditures? No, the funds cannot be used to purchase past expenditures. They can only be used for current or future expenses. This may include new obligations or bills on prior unpaid obligations that come from due following the SFA receipt of SCA funds. An example would be an SFA that signed a purchasing contract for milk before the start of the school year that is paid for on a monthly basis. If SCA funds are received by the SFA on March 1st, 2023, the SFA could pay invoices for milk that are due on or after March 1st from this allocation of funding. Once you receive those funds, you can start making payments to invoices from that date forward. You may still have funds left from the allocations 1 and 2, in which case you can continue using those uh, prior funds distributed. It was mentioned earlier that there was a deadline for the state agencies to disperse funds by September 30, 2023. However, there is not a deadline for SFAs to expend the funds on a local level. It is encouraged that SFAs expend funds timely since there is an additional tracking associated with the SCA funds. But it is okay to take your, it is okay if it takes you until like next school year to expend all those funds. Lastly, let's take a look at some other helpful information. Someone very well may ask you for the CFDA number and revenue code. The CFD number is 10.555. That is the same exact number as the National School Lunch Program. The revenue code is going to be 4515. As you reported this year, you will need to report this funding on next year's CNP online application of your income and expense report. And we have received a couple calls asking for that CFDA number because of the auditors wanted it. So it's the CFDA number is going to be 10.555. Please see the attached memo SFS 22-54. This memo contains the third allocation and questions and answers related to the supply chain assistance funds. And once appropriation control completes the third allocation, we will send out a memo that lists each individual sponsor and a dollar amount that they are going to be awarded. Thank you so much for attending this training with us today. As always, you can reach us at Child Nutrition Programs at la.gov or by calling 225-342-9661. Feel free to enter your questions in the chat box. We will have time to take a few questions. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat box. If you can think of anything, feel free to call us or email us. Have a great day.